featuring Nobody's Pilgrims, a novel about three teenagers escaping the United States-Mexico border and pursued by evil. The book is written by multi-award-winning author Sergio Troncoso, our guest for today, and it won the 2022 Gold Medal for Best Novel, Adventure or Drama in English at the International Latino Book Awards. Don't go away, we will be right back. If you're just joining us, welcome. This is the Writers' Corner live show, and I'm Bridget Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa. In today's show, we're going to be talking to an amazing author, Sergio Troncoso, about his book, which recently won an award, and the book is called Nobody's Pilgrims. If this is your first time watching the show, please let us know whether you're watching us over on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and also on Amazon Live, where the book is actually in the carousel, so you can get a copy of the book. Then welcome. This live stream is made possible by StreamYard, Creative Edge, and BeLive Media. So a special warm welcome to the show. We're talking about Nobody's Pilgrims, a novel by Sergio Troncoso. But one of the things Mary and I routinely do is also help authors level up, because a lot of authors are using an online method to promote their books. We haven't quite gone back yet to in-person events, although a lot of authors are starting to do some book signings. So here's one or two quick tips for you. A lot of authors are going live using their mobile phones, and there's nothing wrong with that. But here's a quick recommendation. Generally speaking, people will hold their phone in portrait mode, but it means that you've got a very limited, tiny little space to show yourself and your book. And a quick way to fix that is to go into your settings, whether it's Android or Apple, and turn on the auto rotation, so you can turn your phone into landscape mode. And that way you can use half the screen for yourself and the other half to show your book or your books, and just make it really interactive, and people can see your hands, and it makes for a more enjoyable experience when you are promoting your book. So without any further ado, I want to welcome my amazing co-host, Mary Elizabeth Jackson. She's a special needs and disabilities advocate, and also an award-winning author, children's book author herself, and she's also a ghost writer. Mary, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And yes, we do love our external equipment, don't we? Because it sure does make a lot of difference in the way the presentation is. So we want to be able to help folks look their best. I'm doing great. We're super excited about our author friend today coming on and getting a little bit of insight into his amazing world and all the great work that he's doing. We're honored to be able to share him with our audience, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. And if you're a new author out there, or you want to level up, Sergio is definitely one of those people that you want to reach out to and connect with, and grab whatever nuggets you can from him. So just a little bit of a background on Sergio. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard and has 2 graduate degrees from Yale. He is a full scholar. He was, up until recently, the president of the Texas Institute of Letters, and teaches at the Yale Writers Workshop. So he really genuinely knows his stuff.
He does.
He does. As we said, Sergio is the author of this award-winning book, Nobody's Pilgrims. It's a novel about 3 teenagers escaping the United States-Mexico border and pursued by evil. We're going to ask him to read a little bit from that book. And as I said, this book has just recently won the 2022 Gold Medal for Best Novel, adventure or drama in English at the International Latino Book Awards. Let's invite Sergio to come and join us on screen because we'd love to hear more about his book.
Hello.
Hi.
Sergio, welcome.
Very excited to
Great.
be back on your show.
We're so excited to have you. We were so excited to have you the first time, so we're just that much more excited this time.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Sergio, first of all, huge congratulations on the 2022 gold medal for best novel that was just awarded to the book. Now, apart from the obvious excitement of getting this level of recognition for your book, what would you say is the significance of receiving a book award? Because not every book gets an award. How does that make a difference when you can actually say to someone, my book won this award?
Well, it's interesting because it depends on the award, I would say. It does help in terms of putting your book a little bit further forward in terms of the public eye and readers, and maybe a reader that does not know your work might give you a chance and say, oh, this book just won a gold medal, the first place of all the books submitted for these awards. So I think it does that. It also helps you as a writer simply to give you a boost. You feel like you didn't spend the last 3 or 4 years of your life and it wasn't worth it. And you can see that it does have a little bit of an effect on sales. And over time, I think you can definitely see this. I think for a variety of reasons, I'm happy to get the books in front of judges, and I don't mind competing because that's sort of what you're doing anyway. When you're writing a book, you're going to be put in front of editors, in front of other readers, and they will be judging your book. So I think I'm sort of used to it, and I don't always win an award, but I'd like to put myself out there and have people respond to my work and give me feedback, because all the judges, of course, give you feedback, especially when you're a finalist, so you're one of the last 3 to be considered for the awards. And if you win a very big award, like the National Book Award or the Pulitzer Prize, well, then your sales skyrocket, and all of that is very helpful to you as a writer.
Very much so. And it does get your foot in the door in a lot of different places, doesn't it? So, there are people who don't think awards are that big a deal, but and in many ways they are, because it gives a book validation as opposed to just any other book on the shelf in a store somewhere. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I as president of the Texas Institute of Letters, which I just ended in April, I served a 2-year term. I was actually responsible for 12 judging committees, and I appointed all 36 judges, 3 judges per committee. And so if an organization like the Texas Institute of Letters or the International Latino Book Awards, if they have a process that's full of integrity, that you have independent judges, well, all of this gives more cachet to the award, because it's not like your friends judging your work. It's really independent readers, judges, writers, other authors judging these awards. So that, I think, makes a big difference when people understand that the award was done in a very good way. Then, of course, the award will have more meaning to you as a writer.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so we wanted to ask you, we have, several questions for you, and we wanted to ask you about, we want you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your education. Now, you didn't come from a background of going to Yale, right?
Well, yeah, I grew up right next to the Mexican, U.S.-Mexico border. My house on San Lorenzo Street in Isleta was on the outskirts of El Paso. And I could walk to the Mexico border within a 10-minute walk from it. So it was that close. And everybody in that neighborhood were Mexican immigrants, as were my parents. And they usually came over with very little. In fact, we built our own house with our own hands. It wasn't pre-made by a developer. We moved into the house before there were windows in the house, when there were plywood on the windows. And for the first year, we had kerosene lamps and stoves. We didn't have electricity. And we had an outhouse in the backyard. And of course, I always tell all my Yale students, well, that's how I started. I was very much the opposite of the Andover Exeter kid that had a lot of money. We had no money. And I think one of the things that made a difference in my life is that I loved to read. I was a bookworm. And so I would go to the public libraries in El Paso and spend weekends there reading, because that's really what propelled me forward as a student in high school. And I also loved to write. My sister, who was editor of the school newspaper, the high school newspaper, the Isleta High School newspaper, she got me into journalism as a freshman. I started writing for the school newspaper from freshman year on, and then became editor by the time I was a senior. And as a junior and a senior, I won Texas State Awards for high school journalism. So I was really getting into writing, and I loved writing. And there's even a picture of me on my website where I have sort of a Donny Osmond hair. That was the style back then. I don't know if you know Donny Osmond, but it was sort of a helmet of hair, the 70s, the disco era, so to speak. And then I had just won a Gannett Foundation Award to study high school journalism in the summer. So I didn't come from a background that went to Harvard and Yale. I would say most of the kids, half the kids in my high school, probably didn't go to college. So it was very different. And when they accepted me at Harvard, it was like going to Mars, going to another world that I had no clue what it was like. I did not know Boston got cold, so I had only T-shirts of my favorite rock bands, like America and Led Zeppelin and whatever. And so I had to actually get a used coat in Harvard Square when it started snowing, because I got cold. And so anyway, so it's just sort of a long story of going from really the outskirts and the edges of this country to the center of the intellectual world in many ways of the United States.
But you give a lot of hope, inspiration. Wow. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it all begins with my Mexican parents. I mean, I would emphasize that. They taught me how to work really hard. They taught me how to work until I dropped every day and then do it again the next day. And I just simply applied that to my intellectual work. So at Harvard, when I was very scared and I didn't know what it was like, and I had an accent, I stayed until the libraries closed. I read as much as I could to catch up, to do better. And so this sort of work ethic that my parents taught me was central to my success. And I tell people that, especially if you're a Mexican American, use the good values that you find in your families to propel yourself forward. And I think I definitely use those values for success at Harvard and at Yale. And I think often we kind of somehow think they're antithetical. Growing up poor and then going to a place like Harvard and Yale, but actually it's the opposite. There are many things you learn from your parents who work really hard that you can apply to places like Harvard and Yale.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and inspirational for young people. I mean, the most most people around us are not privileged. They don't come from a privileged position. And so that's very inspirational for people to know that they can still reach great heights despite their perceived disadvantage. But when it comes to reading as such, who encouraged that in you? Who created a love for reading in you as a young person?
Well, I would start with my teachers. I had some great teachers in grade school and in, certainly in high school and then later in college. And all of these, they found out that, of course, I love storytelling, I love reading, and I love oral storytelling, a lot of which I got from my grandmother, my Mexican grandmother, who would sit around on her porch and tell these exciting, violent stories about the Mexican Revolution, where she grew up as a teenager. And I had a teacher like Joanna Newman started giving me, sending me books, and another teacher, another English teacher in high school, Pearl Crouch, who was also the editor, she was the faculty advisor of the school newspaper. She was always sending me articles and books to read. And they knew that I had this love of reading, and they fed it. And I think another teacher, my fourth grade teacher, whom I'm still friends with, Lori Ryan, she knew I loved to read, and every Friday she would give me these little paperback books that I could keep at home and read. So I think the people who encouraged me were primarily my teachers, and then of course my parents, who didn't have a lot of money. And my father worked as a construction engineer, and so he wasn't a big reader, but this is what he did. He said, I'm going to build you, when I was a kid, he said, I'm going to build you a shelf in your room for all these little books that you have. So he wasn't a big reader, but he supported my habit of reading. Instead of saying, why aren't you spending time, playing baseball or whatever? And I did play baseball, and I loved playing basketball, but I loved to read even more. He helped me by building the kind of room that I wanted, basically a little library. And so he knew how to build shelves, so he built these shelves. And my mother also read a lot in Spanish. She would read El Fronterizo, and she would read different Juarez newspapers, because they were both from Juarez, Mexico. And so she was a big reader, and my mother was probably an influence at home in terms of the stuff she was reading at home. I don't know if you know, Reader's Digest, right? Well, she would read from cover to cover the Spanish version, which is called Selecciones. And it's the same book, it's just translated into Spanish. And so we had a lot of those that my mother would read from cover to cover. And so I saw this sort of reading culture at least being reinforced or even encouraged at home.
And that's so vital. It's so vitally important to nurture that love of literature from very early on. I happened to talk to a speech therapist yesterday, and she's on this campaign for phonetic learning and reading in early babies. And I know what I use with my children to get them to love books, and it's just so important. And you've just done so many things. It's just amazing. You have a library named after you, which, okay, I don't know about Brigetti, but I don't know anyone else who has a library named after them. So I feel very honored that we get to have you on our show. And so can you tell us, how did that come about? For something like that to happen, because that's really huge. And actually, it should have been. It should have happened. You've read so many books. You deserve a library. Yeah.
Well, it was probably one of the biggest honors I've gotten as an author. In 2014, and I had already written, 4 or 5 books by then. I just finished my 8th book with Nobody's Pilgrims. But in 2014, I got this call from somebody on the city council, the El Paso City Council. And they told me, I think they called me on a Friday, and they said, you have to get to El Paso on Monday. And I said, well, what's this about? And I thought, did I do something wrong? And he said, no, this is something good. And they wouldn't tell me about it. But I knew it was some sort of, maybe there were a proclamation of whatever or something about Sergio Troncoso. And so I had to, of course, buy that ticket in 2 days, which, cost a pretty penny, as you know, when you're trying to buy a last minute airline ticket. And I got to El Paso, and they said, you got to show up to the city council meeting. And they talked about, my life. They talked about how I had grown up very poor. And, they talked about, where I ended up at Yale, teaching at Yale. And all of this is, it gets me a little emotional because it is an important moment when your community, recognizes what you've done. And so anyway, so after that, they voted, and the city council unanimously voted to rename one of the public library branches the Sergio Troncoso Public Branch Library. And so it is one of the 12 library branches in the El Paso library system. And it's a library branch that is within walking distance of my mother's house. And it's a beautiful branch. They just spent $750,000 renovating the inside, and it's beautiful. And I know the branch library manager very well. And after the library got named after me, I started a program of called the Troncoso Reading Prizes, in which I basically pay kids to read. I fund these prizes. I give 6 prizes every year, and they're for middle school kids and for high school kids. And whatever child reads the most books between September and December of every year, and they come and report the books that they read to the public library librarians at the Troncoso Library. And so they make sure that they've actually read the books. And whoever reads the most books gets one of these 6 prizes. And the top prize is two first places at $125, and I think a second prize is $100, and a third prize is $75. And I fly in December. I present these prizes to the children. I also give them copies of my books. And of course, their parents come, and it ends up becoming like a big educational session. Like, how did a poor kid from you, who started right here, end up at Harvard and at Yale? And so, and I try to help the parents. But one of my main messages is encourage your children to read, and read to your children often, before they're walking, when they're toddlers. Every night, read to your children. Make sure you are going to the library, just like we did with our kids. We had library day every 2 weeks, and we would go to our local public library and pick up 10, 15 books that they like. There is always something that a child will find fascinating in the library. Either they're interested in dragons, or they're interested in trucks, or they're interested in space, or they're interested in fantasy. And I had 2 boys, and we did the same thing. My wife and I, Laura, we took them to the library, and we read with them every single day. And the library day was every 2 weeks. And they became, of course, very good readers. And it's not magic. It's really just creating a culture at home that encourages reading and encourages storytelling and encourages learning, language. So anyway, that's how it happened. And I was very proud of that. And I'm going to be going back to El Paso, Texas in December to present these reading prizes. So I was just talking to the branch manager, and they set up, they also give them certificates, and it becomes a whole affair for that day. And I'm happy to do it. And I told them I will fund these prizes until I'm not around. I will fund them forever, basically, because it means more to me than just having a name on a building. I really want to have an effect on the community to encourage poor kids to read. And it's a community of working class immigrants. It's a community, maybe lower middle class now. It's become even a little better than it used to be. But it's all, I would say, 90 or even 95% Mexican or Mexican immigrant community.
Wow, that is just amazing and heartwarming. And I wish more accomplished authors like yourself would do something like this to get personally involved with the library to foster this
Right.
amazing culture
Right.
of reading. Sergio, we're
But
going to take a very small break,
okay.
and can we ask you to read us a section out of your book? Would that be okay?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. If you've just joined us, you're watching Writers Corner live show with Sergio Troncoso, and he's going to read us a section out of his award-winning book, Nobody's Pilgrims.
So I'm just going to set it up a little bit because I'm going to read two pieces, one from the very beginning of the novel and then one towards the middle to give you a sense of what's going on. So Turi, Molly, and Arnulfo, they're the three principal characters in this book. And they're all 17. And Turi and Arnulfo were basically depicted on the cover. They meet at a chicken farm carrying live chicken from trucks in Isleta near the Mexican border. And Turi gets the idea of basically joining Arnulfo when Arnulfo is going to go to Kansas City on a ride in a pickup with a foreman from the chicken farm to join them. And so he joins them on a lark because, things are not going very good for him. Turi's an orphan and Arnulfo is an undocumented immigrant. And along the way, they will eventually meet Molly, who's also a 17-year-old, a poor white girl from Missouri. And she joins them on this trip. And so one of the important things about the novel, and I'm going to read this right here at the very beginning, is that Turi is a bookworm. And so very much, I guess, in a way like I was when I was on the border. And one of the things that reading does for Turi, it propels his imagination forward. He imagines himself somewhere else. And in his case, it's Connecticut and it's New England. He's always imagined going to New England, although he's never been there. And so he's constantly reading and discovering books about New England. And so in this very first section I'm going to read, and then I'm going to read another section after this, you can see this how imagination propels his decisions to leave the border and have this adventure across the country. So this is Turi at just the first page or so in the book. Turi Martinez reads a mystery book that transports him to the forest of Connecticut and to the adventures of a boy on the Housatonic River. But Turi's neighborhood of Isleta doesn't have forest and is surrounded only by the Chihuahuan Desert on the United States-Mexico border. Leaves do not litter the ground like a multicolored carpet as Turi imagined they do in Connecticut in October or November. Instead, hot, coarse sand covers the ground and swirls in the air with every gust of wind. At the library of Isleta High, Turi often loses himself in photographs of New England. Church steeples like sharp white cones piercing a blue sky, forest dense and impenetrable, and layer after layer of misty green mountainsides in the faraway horizon. Turi imagined building a cabin deep in a thicket of trees next to a brook where he can fish. He will have to acquire a taste for fish which at present he doesn't have. He will find a secret place where his Aunt Seferina will never find him and his Uncle Ramon will never bother to look. Turi imagines it will be like a real version of where Charlie Brown lives, with dog houses like Snoopy's and thick snow in the winter, green baseball diamonds, and pumpkin patches, and a Thanksgiving dinner at a long, jam-packed table with red candles. Connecticut is the kind of place where a boy can cut his own Christmas tree in the mountains behind his backyard. Turi imagines in this Connecticut that he will not be alone, yet not with someone like the woman with the big butt in the magazine that Turi taped on the blue wheelbarrow. Turi imagines someone beautiful and nice, someone still only a blur in his mind, someone who won't mind someone like him. So this literally, that was the first couple of paragraphs in the novel. And I'm going to read another section. So it's a very pastoral view and very much of an idealistic New England. And so the novel is about going from the idealism of his dreams of what the American dream is to what the reality is. And so the reality is that he has to go through a gauntlet of a lot of difficult things that are going to happen to them. Dangerous things, evil people after them, and they're going to survive these trials. But when he actually gets to the real Connecticut, something terrible has happened. This section I'm going to read now, and the novel is in many ways going from the dreams that you think of where you're going to where you actually arrive. And by the way, when they get to Connecticut, there are some people who, of course, don't want Mexican immigrants in Connecticut, and they face some racism at home. So I won't spoil the novel, but this is on page 219. This is in Connecticut, where something awful has happened, and they've just found out about it, and so this is Studi just trying to keep his dream alive, and really the way it's kept alive is by his friends helping him as he's going through these trials, and they're trying to escape these evil people who are after them. So this is 219. It's near midnight. They drive west on Route 202 through Avon, Canton, and Torrington, Connecticut. The dark, empty streets in front of them are a reflection of what's inside Studi's head. The streetlights mindlessly blinking yellow at corners. No lights inside any stores. No one out anywhere. Nothing. The nothingness called to Studi. He'd like to open the truck's door and succumb to the river of glittery black asphalt coursing underneath them. Molly's hand keeps him from doing it. Molly's warmth on his hand, Molly's head on his shoulders, the scent of Molly's breath wafting around his neck. She mercifully asleep. Even Rudy's grim face as Studi glances at him, his fierce eyes that never stray from the road, and his 2 tears, half dry on that cheek of brown granite. All of these images keep Studi from yanking open the truck's door and jumping into the night. So one of my very favorite writers in Texas, John Philip Santos, described this. He said, "Sergio, this is your best paragraph." He loves this paragraph. And it is sort of filling up the reality of Connecticut versus the dreamlike sense that he had of what Connecticut was when he had never set foot in it. And so a lot of this novel is about these 3 teenagers who never give up on their American dream, who keep fighting for their American dream, even after awful things happen to them, even after they survive evil people coming after them. And I think it's about the resiliency, the grit of these 3 17-year-olds. And of course, also what happens is Studi and Molly start creating a romance. They're from very different worlds. She's never met a Mexican American. And Studi has never been to Missouri. When they drive through Missouri, and she decides to join them. But how do they connect? They connect through words, through books. They are both readers. They love to read. And in fact, they meet at the Mark Twain National Forest. And the reason the Studi and Arnulfo, who are trying to escape these evil people, stop at the Mark Twain National Forest is because Studi is carrying a crate of books, and one of them is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn in the back of the truck. And he said, let's stop here. They won't find us here. And so they stop at the Mark Twain National Forest, and eventually something happens to them. And this girl, Molly, saves him and helps to get their truck fixed. And they connect with her. And then they start this wordplay. Studi is teaching Molly Spanish, and Molly is talking about talking about Missouri and talking about Mark Twain, and they love this wordplay between them, and that's how really their love affair begins. They find out we're from very different worlds, but we are actually in many ways similar, have very similar values. We are connecting with each other, and they form this incredible bond. And I think it's also about, one of the last things I'll say is, it's about one of the main problems that I've written about in essays is that I think the main problem with our country, the United States, is that we are not a we. We're fighting religiously, we're fighting geographically, politically, ethnically, racially, and we're struggling to come together as a group. And that was really the central focus of the novel. How do these three teenagers from very different worlds come together, form this incredible bond in which they're risking their lives for each other? And as they go through these trials, their bond becomes stronger, not weaker. And that for me was the gist of the novel. How do these three very different people form a community and show us in many ways how you form a community that is very bonded together and works together to survive and even thrive amid a lot of problems and evil people after them. So that's really what the novel's about.
That's amazing.
Beautiful.
Sergio, thank you so much. So anyone who's missed this episode live and watching this on the replay, go back and just watch the entire episode. So many gems shared in here. And again, congratulations on winning your award. So to our live viewers and replay viewers, thank you for watching the show. And we'll see you back next week. Sergio, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much.